We betrayed the one person who loved us both. And there is no version of this where that doesn't cost us everything.
Priska.
Tell me it meant nothing.
It meant nothing.
Priska turns to face him.
You know I can't do that.
You know I can't do that. Jaewon steps closer. His voice drops. Everything is gone. My father, my company, and your name is on every document that burned it down. Then you already know I didn't do it. Her voice is steel.
Because if I wanted to burn you,
because if I wanted to burn you, you would have felt it coming. His jaw tightens. So why didn't you leave? Barely a whisper now. Every time things got dangerous. Why didn't you just leave Priska? Her eyes fill. She doesn't look away. Because the night your brother died, you took my hand in the dark. Her voice breaks and rebuilds in the same breath. And I saw you. Just you. Not the Empire. Not the man everyone fears.
And I saw you.
Pause.
Just you, not the Empire.
Just a man who had never once been chosen. Silence. His hand moves toward her face. She steps back. We betrayed the one person who loved us both. A whisper directly to him. And there is no version of this where that doesn't cost us everything.
And there is no version of this where that doesn't cost us everything.
Priska. Her hand finds the door.
You're the
only thing I have ever wanted to deserve. Her knuckles go white. She does not turn around. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Priska Igbo did not come back to Seoul to fall in love. She came back with a Georgetown master's degree, a leather portfolio that had survived 4 countries, and the kind of discipline built in the silence of a woman who has learned to want things carefully. She had a plan. She had always had a plan. The plan did not include Shin Jae-won. She saw Jisoo before Jisoo saw her. That had always been the way between them. Priska noticed things first. Jisoo felt them first. 2 years and 2 continents had not changed that. Jisoo was near the barrier with both arms already open. Radiant in a cream coat. Hair shorter than Priska. Remembered, the most genuinely joyful person in that entire arrivals hall. Priska walked straight into her arms. 2 years of distance collapsed in one embrace. You're actually here. Jisoo's voice was muffled against her shoulder. I'm here. Priska laughed. You can let go now. I really can't. In the car, Jisoo talked the way she always talked when she had been saving things up. Warm and continuous, each detail connected to the last by everything she had wanted to share and couldn't across a phone screen. The new restaurant, the Han River in October light. Her mother's renovation. Her father's war with his garden. Then, casually, the way you say the name of someone who is simply part of your world now. And Jae-won. Priska turned from the window. Tell me about him. Jisoo's hands adjusted on the steering wheel, just slightly. A movement so small most people would not have caught it. Priska caught everything. He is 1 second longer than the question required. The most beautiful man I have ever seen. Another pause. And the most complicated. That sounds like a warning. Jisoo smiled at the road ahead. Something in the smile Priska couldn't quite read. Warmth, and underneath the warmth, something that was not quite sadness and not quite resignation. It sounds like my life, Jisoo said. The rain started. Quiet, steady, inevitable. The apartment was on the 14th floor in Mapo-gu. Fresh chrysanthemums on the counter. A key beside them with Priska's name in Jisoo's handwriting. Not the gestures of someone who arranged a space. The gestures of someone who understood what it felt like to arrive somewhere new. Jisoo, don't. Already in the kitchen. I spoke to Jae-won, senior business strategist position, open 4 months, 11 candidates, 0 offers. She turned. He wants to meet you. I didn't come back to Seoul to be handed what? Steady. Certain. An introduction from someone who loves you, too. A company that needs exactly what you are. She tilted her head. Thursday, 10 o'clock. Wear something that says you already own the room. Priska looked at her for a long moment. Jisoo looked back with the calm patience of someone who already knew how this ended. Fine, Priska said. I'll meet him. The Shin Group headquarters caught the morning light and held it like it had always belonged there. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass. Seoul spread below like a map of itself. He was already seated when she entered. She noted the deliberateness immediately. He had not stood at the door, simply seated. The stillness of a man who understood that power did not need to perform itself. She walked the full length of the room, heels quiet, spine straight, face communicating exactly one thing, that she believed she belonged here. Because she did. When she reached the desk, he looked up. Shen Jae-won. Jisoo had said the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Priska had adjusted for spousal hyperbole. She had adjusted incorrectly. He rose. Ms. Igbo. Mr. Shin. 40 minutes of the sharpest professional conversation she'd experienced since her thesis defense. Questions designed not to test what she knew but how she thought. She answered each one with her default directness and watched him listen in the way that meant he was actually inside every word she said. 28 minutes in, he looked at her directly. Not at her portfolio. At her. She was mid-sentence. She lost her place for exactly half a second. She recovered instantly. Finished the sentence without a tremor. He noticed. She knew because he was the kind of man who noticed everything and let nothing register on his face. They were the same in that way. At the end, she placed her terms on the desk without apology. Monday, 8 o'clock. She stood. Monday, 8 o'clock. She walked to the door and did not look back. The elevator stopped at the 40th floor on her way down. Jae-won stepped in. 45 seconds. 40 floors. Neither of them manufactured conversation. They stood in the charged stillness of two people aware of something they were both refusing to name. The doors opened. Neither of them moved for exactly 2 seconds. Then she walked out. She did not look back. She stood on the pavement outside and thought about those 45 seconds with the precision she brought to everything that mattered. She did not examine what she found. The weeks found their rhythm. She arrived at 8 every morning and left when the work was done. The boardroom noticed her within the first week. Not loudly, in the way that mattered. A recalibration of who people directed their sharpest thinking toward. Jae-won watched from a careful distance and began creating reasons for her to be in his space. Strategy sessions that didn't need her. Her name on attendee lists without explanation. He remembered everything she mentioned in passing. A restaurant she wanted to try appeared in her calendar as a team lunch. A detail about her mother surfaced 3 weeks later in a gesture she couldn't directly attribute to him but knew. She came to work sharper every morning. He was her best friend's husband. She said it every morning, like a fact that needed the repetition to stay true. It became harder to hold. Jisoo's dinner was on a Friday in late October. 4 of them, Priska, Jisoo, Jae-won, Mirai, who laughed at everything and filled every silence beautifully. The food was extraordinary. Jisoo moved through the evening with the specific pleasure of someone who found genuine joy in gathering the people she loved. Jaewon was attentive, engaged, a perfectly present host. But Priska watched Jisoo reach across the table, a small involuntary gesture, the kind that happens when you love someone and they're close enough to touch, and watched him receive it, politely, not coldly, not warmly, just politely, like furniture that had always been in the room. Jisoo's hand returned to her glass. She did not appear to notice, or she had made her peace with it long ago. Priska could not tell which, and the uncertainty sat in her chest like something she had not been prepared to see. After dinner, Jisoo and Mirai moved to the kitchen. Priska stood at the window, Seoul below, lit and indifferent. "You're cataloguing again." She turned. Jaewon, a few feet away, watching her with that attention she had been refusing to examine for weeks. "Most people find it unsettling," she said. "Most people are unsettled by precision. Simply, like a fact. A pause. You're not afraid of me? Not a question. Should I be?" Something moved across his face, there and gone in less than a second. The expression of a man who had received an answer he had not prepared for. "Tea?" Jisoo's voice from the kitchen. "Yes," Priska called back without breaking his gaze. One additional second. Then she turned toward the kitchen and did not look back. New York was different, and she had prepared, and it was not enough. The meetings were legitimate. She checked. Real clients. Real outcomes. He had manufactured her presence on the trip, not the trip itself. She held that distinction carefully because she needed something to hold. On the third evening, the client dinner ended early. Just the two of them. The city outside the window carrying no memory of Seoul or of any particular configuration of things between them. He said something about choice, about being born so completely into a life that the question of choosing it never arises, about existing inside something you didn't select and will never be asked to justify. She listened without interrupting. "That sounds like a very expensive kind of loneliness," she said. He looked at her. Not the way he looked at problems. The way he had looked at her in that elevator. Like she was the first real thing he had seen in a very long time. Yes, quietly. Like something released rather than said. Exactly like that. Nothing happened. They paid the bill, took separate cabs. She lay in the dark of her hotel room and stared at the ceiling. She had built herself carefully. She had left doors open deliberately. She had chosen which ones with the precision that defined everything she did. She had not chosen this door. It was the only one she could see. Back in Seoul, the company's financial structures continued to trouble her. One flagged transfer. One closed door politely but firmly. One encrypted folder on her personal drive growing slowly with things that did not add up. She said nothing to anyone. A family dinner. Near the end of the meal, Jaewon's aunt said something. A name, a city, a timeline that landed in the general space of the table before anyone could redirect it. Jisoo redirected it so smoothly Priska would have missed it if she hadn't been paying the particular kind of attention she paid to everything. She caught it, a name she didn't recognize, a city that wasn't Seoul, a period that placed Jisoo somewhere that didn't match anything Priska knew about those years. She looked up, found Jisoo's eyes. A fraction of a second, the length of a caught breath. Jisoo smiled, warm and seamless. Redirected the conversation like water moving around a stone. Priska smiled too, filed it with everything else. the second New York trip. Jisoo called both of them on the second afternoon. Neither answered. They called back separately the next morning with the same excuse in almost the same words. Jisoo sat in the Hanamdong apartment after the second call ended. She did not make tea, did not reach for her book, did not turn on the television. She sat very still for a very long time. Then she went to her husband's study, second drawer of the filing cabinet, a business card she had found 2 years ago and saved quietly, the way a woman saves something she knows she will someday need. She took it out, looked at it, placed it on the kitchen counter beside her phone. She would call in the morning. She had been patient for a very long time. She was almost done being patient. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comments section. Jisoo was almost done being patient. Priska didn't know that yet. She knew other things. She knew the crack in the distance between her and Jae-won had stopped being manageable somewhere over the Pacific on the flight back from New York. She knew she came to work sharper every morning, and it was not working and had not been working for weeks. She knew she was carrying something she had no clean category for and no honest way to put down. She did not know that in a kitchen in Hanamdong, a woman she loved was standing with a business card and a decision that had already been made. She was about to find out what it cost to not know things. It was a Tuesday night in late November when everything changed. She had left her laptop charger on her desk. Discovered it at 9:45 from her couch. Went back. The building at 10:15. Most lights off, the cleaning crew finished. The 42nd floor silent except for the low hum of a city that never fully stopped. She saw the light under his office door. She almost kept walking. She opened the door. Jae-won was sitting at his desk in the near dark. Only the city light coming through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Seoul burning gold 40 floors below, like it had no idea what was happening up here. He was not on his phone, not at his computer, not doing anything, just sitting inside something too heavy to manage and too private to perform. Jae-won. He looked up. She had seen him controlled. She had seen him cold. She had seen him unguarded in a midtown restaurant in a way that had cost her everything she had been using to hold herself in place. She had not seen him like this. Every layer gone. The CEO, the empire, the careful architecture of a man who had spent his entire life managing what the world saw of him. All of it simply absent. "My brother," he said. "He died this afternoon." She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't fill the silence with any of the things people fill silences with when they don't know what else to do. She crossed the room, sat in the chair across from his desk, and stayed. The city burned below them. The office was quiet. She did not speak, and he did not speak, and neither of them moved. And somewhere in the long dark of that silence, something that had been building since October simply settled. Like a thing that had finally found the place it had always been heading. At some point he reached across the desk, not toward her face, not with intention, the way a person reaches for something solid when the ground disappears. His hand found hers between them. She let him. They sat like that without speaking, his hand holding hers and soul burning below, and the grief sitting between them and the other thing sitting between them too. The thing with no clean category, the thing she had been filing and arguing against and refusing to examine since the elevator in October. It was simply there now. Named by proximity and the specific honesty of 2 in the morning in a dark office with nothing left to hide behind. I never chose any of it. Quiet, frayed, the voice of a man speaking from somewhere below the controlled surface for the first time. Not this office, not this company, not my... He stopped. I've been the most disciplined version of a man who never once made a choice for himself. A pause that cost him something visible, and I forgot to notice what it was costing me, until you walked into my boardroom and looked at me like I was just a man. She looked at their hands on the desk. You are just a man, she said quietly. That has never changed. He looked at her with something she had stopped trying to file weeks ago. They stayed until 2 a.m, not talking, just staying. She drove home and sat in her car outside her building and looked at the steering wheel and understood that she had already made the decision she had been pretending she hadn't made. She went upstairs. She did not sleep. 3 days later, she stopped pretending. It happened in the simplest possible way, which was the only way it ever could have happened between two people who were both too precise and too controlled for anything dramatic. They were the last 2 people in the building. A Thursday evening. She was finishing a report. He appeared at her office door the way he had started appearing, without announcement, without pretense, simply there. He leaned against the door frame and looked at her and said nothing. She looked up from her screen. Go home, Jae-won. You first. She looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had sat in the dark and taken her hand and told her the truth. At the man who was her best friend's husband and her employer and the person she had been losing the argument against since October. At the man who was looking at her right now, not like a CEO, looks at a senior business strategist, but like a man looks at the one thing in his life that arrived without permission and refused to leave. This is going to cost us everything, she said. I know, he said. I need you to know that I know that too, she said. I'm not confused about what this is. I'm not telling myself a story that makes it easier. Neither am I. She looked at him. He looked at her. She saved her document, closed her laptop, stood up. Then we know, she said quietly. The distance between her office door and where she was standing had never been shorter. She chose it with her eyes completely open, not because she had stopped caring about what it would cost, not because she had convinced herself of anything that made it acceptable. Because she was human, he was the man who had sat in the dark and told her the truth, and she was the woman who had stayed, and she could not undo what that had made them to each other. Some doors once opened cannot be closed again. She had stopped pretending she wanted to close this one. What nobody saw, what Priska didn't see because she was not looking for it, and what the company didn't see because it had no reason to, was Jae-won pulling his brother's accident report from a private server on a Friday afternoon 2 weeks later. He read it at his desk with the door closed, and his face completely controlled and his hands very still on the keyboard. He read it again. The details were too clean. Accidents of this specific type did not produce documentation this precise. The response time was wrong. The witness accounts were identical in phrasing, not similar, identical, in the way that happened when accounts had been coordinated rather than collected independently. He closed the report, opened his father's private calendar for the week his brother died, sat very still for a long time. He said nothing to anyone. Not to Priska, not to his mother, not to a single person in the company or outside it. He simply closed the calendar and went back to his afternoon and carried what he now understood in the place where a man carries the things that are too dangerous to put down and too heavy to keep holding. Something in him had shifted permanently. What he was willing to protect had changed. What he was willing to destroy had changed. He had not yet decided what to do with either of those changes. December arrived, and with it, the specific guilt of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and could not stop. It was a Saturday afternoon. Jisoo called at 11. "Shopping. I need your opinion on something, and you're the only person whose opinion I actually trust." Priska almost said no. She said yes. They spent 3 hours in Myeongdong, moving between shops with the easy, unthinking rhythm of two women who had been doing this since university, who knew each other's taste and instincts and the specific face the other made when something was wrong, even when they were saying it was fine. Jisoo was radiant, warm, fully present in the way she was always fully present, asking questions about Priska's work, laughing at a memory from their Seoul University days, stopping to buy 2 identical scarves because she wanted Priska to have one. Priska accepted the scarf, folded it carefully, placed it in her bag, and sat with the specific weight of accepting a gift from the woman whose husband she was in love with. The woman who had opened every door for her in this city, who had put flowers on her counter and her name on a key, who was standing beside her right now in a Myeongdong shop laughing about something that had happened in a seminar in London 7 years ago and had no idea, or so Priska believed, that the person laughing with her was the reason her marriage was fracturing. The guilt was not abstract. It was physical. It lived in her chest like something with weight and temperature. It pressed down hardest in moments like this one, moments of pure, uncomplicated Jisoo warmth. Because pure, uncomplicated warmth from a person you are betraying is the most specific and unreasonable kind of pain. She smiled at Jisoo's story about London. She laughed at the right moment. She carried the scarf home and put it on her counter beside the chrysanthemums that had long since been replaced, and sat in her apartment alone and thought about what she was, and what she was doing, and what it was costing the person who deserved it least. Then her phone lit up. Jae-won. She looked at his name on the screen for a moment. She answered. That was the thing she could not reconcile. That was the specific shape of what she had become, a woman who felt the full weight of what she was doing and did it anyway. Not without guilt, not without knowing. With both. Completely. Every time. It was January, a Tuesday night. The building quiet. The kind of work she did with one part of her mind while another part processed the day. She followed a number through 3 subsidiary layers, through 2 holding structures, through a registration document, her name, her full legal birth name, the one on her passport and her original degree and nothing she used professionally in Seoul. The registration date was 18 months before she returned to Seoul, before Jisoo had mentioned the position, before she had booked a flight, before any of this had begun. She read it 3 times. Then she closed the file, closed her laptop, sat in the complete silence of an office 40 floors above a city that was moving with its perpetual indifference below, and felt the specific cold of a realization that rearranges the architecture of everything you thought you understood. Someone had known she was coming before she arrived. Someone had built something in her name before she got here. She did not move for a very long time. He was at her door at 8 the next morning. The junior analyst. She had noted him in the background of meetings since her first week. Quiet, precise, the kind of presence that rooms absorbed without registering. He was standing at her office door when she arrived. Not knocking, just standing with his hands at his sides and his face carrying the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment for a very long time. She looked at him. He crossed the room, placed a USB drive on her desk. Small, plain, unmarked. left without a word. She looked at the drive for a long time. Then she picked it up. What was on it stopped her cold. 3 years of private records. Methodical, documented, devastating. Every suspicious meeting logged with time and date. Every irregular financial instruction traced to its source. Every thread connecting the company's illegal operations to the people who had authorized them. Assembled with the quiet patience of someone who had been watching for years and had known, somehow, that the right person would eventually arrive. She read every file. She now held more truth about this empire than almost anyone alive. She sat with that weight in the silence of her office, and outside the floor-to-ceiling glass, Seoul moved with its usual indifference 40 floors below, and she understood that the city she had come back to build something in had been waiting for her in a way she had not understood and had not chosen and could not now unchoose. Her phone lit up on the desk, an unfamiliar number. She answered. Ms. Igbo. A woman's voice. Older, composed. Korean, precise and unhurried in the way of someone who had decided something and was not interested in the version of the conversation where it didn't happen. My name is not important yet. What is important is that I am Shin Jae-won's mother, and there are things you need to know that I have waited too long to say. Priska sat very still. I would like to meet. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, alone. A pause. Will you come? Outside, Seoul burned gold in the January morning. Indifferent, eternal, moving. Yes, Priska said. I'll be there. If you are still here, please tighten your seatbelt for a really bumpy ride. The hotel in Mapo-gu was the kind of place that asked no questions and kept no visible record of its guests. Priska arrived at 8:58, 2 minutes early. She had not slept. The woman was already seated when Priska entered the room. Shan Jae-won's mother was smaller than Priska had imagined, which was itself a strange thing to notice, that she had been imagining her at all. She was perhaps 60, composed in the particular way of someone who has been carrying something heavy for so long that the carrying has become indistinguishable from posture. Her hands were folded on the table. Her eyes, when they met Priska's, were clear and direct, and carried the specific quality of a woman who had made a decision and was no longer afraid of it. Sit down, Ms. Igbo. Priska sat. The woman reached into the bag beside her chair and placed an envelope on the table between them. Old, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges. Sealed. Read this alone, she said. Not here. Not in front of me. She pushed it gently across the table. What you do with it afterward is entirely your choice. I am not here to tell you what to do. I am here because I have been silent for 22 years, and I cannot be silent anymore. What is in it? The truth about this family. A pause. About the marriage my husband arranged. About the man who died to make it possible. Her voice did not waver. About what my husband has been doing with his guilt ever since. Priska looked at the envelope. Why me? She said. Why not the authorities? Why not Jae-won himself? The woman looked at her for a long moment. Because my son is in love with you, she said simply. And you are the only person in this entire situation whose motives are clean. She stood, picked up her bag. Read it alone. Then, decide. She walked to the door. Mrs. Shin. The woman stopped, did not turn around. Did you know? Priska said. When it happened, did you know what he did? A silence that answered everything. Then the door closed. She read the letter in her car in the hotel parking structure with the engine off and the city moving outside the concrete walls like it had no idea what was happening in here. It was written in the hand of a man who had been precise his entire life. The letters controlled, the lines even, the grammar exact. 22 years of age had not changed the precision of the handwriting. Only the content made the hand that wrote it monstrous. He had found out about Jisoo's first marriage through a background investigation he ordered on the family before the arrangement was finalized. A 4-month marriage. A young man. A union that had been dissolved, he wrote. Dissolved with the specific clinical detachment of a man describing something he had engineered rather than something that had simply occurred before anyone in either family's public circle had known it existed. He had not dissolved it through legal means. He had made the young man disappear, and then he had used the secret of that disappearance, the proof he kept, the documentation of what had been done and by whose instruction, as leverage over Jisoo's family for the entirety of the marriage that followed. Compliance. Silence. The appearance of a willing union between two families with shared interests. A cage built from a dead man. Priska sat in her car with the letter in her hands and felt the full architecture of what she had walked into settle around her like something physical. This was not a company. This was not an arranged marriage. This was a family that had been building its empire on the bodies of people who got in the way for 22 years and had not stopped. And her name was on a corporation registered inside that empire 18 months before she arrived. She was already inside the cage. She just hadn't known whose hands had built it. The package was on her doormat when she got home. A plain envelope. No return address. Her name in print so clean it had been generated rather than written. Inside, a single photograph. Her mother, standing outside the small shop 2 streets from her house in Lagos, healthy, going about her morning the way she went about every morning, unhurried, present, completely unaware of the camera that had captured her from across the street. No note, no written threat, no instruction, just the photograph. Priska sat on her floor with it in her hands and felt something move through her that was not anger, and not fear, and not grief, but some precise combination of all three that had no name she knew. She had been afraid of things before, professionally, strategically, the kind of fear that sharpens you rather than stops you. She had never been afraid like this, the specific helpless terror of a threat directed not at yourself, but at someone you love who has nothing to do with any of it. Her mother, in Lagos, who had raised her alone and worked 2 jobs and flown to Georgetown for her graduation and cried through the entire ceremony. She sat with the photograph for a long time. Then she got up. She made coffee. She opened her laptop. She opened the encrypted folder on her personal drive, the one that had been growing since the first number didn't add up. And she looked at everything she had, the USB drive, the shell corporation, the letter, the financial anomalies she had been cataloging for months. She began to build. Not for revenge. Revenge was not a category she operated in. She built the way she had always built everything, methodically, precisely, with the specific discipline of a woman who understood that the truth was not a weapon. It was simply the truth. And she was not the kind of woman who sat on truth to protect herself. If they wanted her afraid, they had miscalculated. She was not afraid. She was working. She worked for 3 days. On the 2nd day, she found the clause. It was buried in the marriage contract, not in the main body, not in the standard terms, but in a subsection addendum that had been attached to the original filing as a separate document and cross-referenced in language so deliberately technical that it would require someone with her specific training to locate it and understand its implications. The clause stated that in the event of a divorce initiated by the wife, the financial settlement would revert entirely to the husband's estate. Not partially, entirely. Jisoo would walk away with nothing. Priska read it twice. Then she pulled the original filing records and looked at the witness signatures on the addendum. One of the signatures was dated 3 days after the document it was witnessing, which meant it had been signed after the fact, which meant the addendum had not been properly witnessed at the time of filing, which meant it was fraudulent. She documented it. Every step, every timestamp, every discrepancy, said nothing to anyone, filed it where it belonged, kept working. On the 3rd day, the piece from the family dinner connected. The name she had filed away, the city, the timeline that placed Jisoo somewhere that didn't match anything Priska knew about those years. She understood now. Jisoo had been married before, a brief marriage, 4 months. A young man who had simply disappeared. Jae-won's father had known, had kept the documentation, had used it as leverage over Jisoo's family for the entirety of the marriage that followed. Jisoo had not entered this marriage freely. She had entered it under the specific duress of a secret her family could not afford to have surfaced. She had been controlled from the moment she said yes. Controlled by a man who built cages from dead men's secrets and called it business. Priska sat with that. The woman who had opened every door for her in this city, who had put flowers on her counter and her name on a key, who had bought her a scarf in Myeongdong and laughed about London and called to check on her and held her hand across lunch tables while knowing that her best friend was in love with her husband. Jisoo had been controlled from every direction. That did not excuse what she had done to Priska, the deliberate use of her, the manufactured proximity, the careful feeding of documents, the photograph of her mother. But it made it human, and human was worse than monstrous because human you could understand. And understanding was its own specific kind of devastation. The divorce papers arrived at Jae-won's office on a Thursday morning. Priska found out through a compliance notification, a legal filing that triggered an automatic alert in the corporate system she had access to. Not from him, not from Jisoo, from a database that didn't know or care what the filing meant to the people whose names were on it. She read the notification, closed the window, sat at her desk and looked at the Seoul skyline through the floor-to-ceiling glass and felt the specific weight of a stone dropping into still water. No splash, no drama, just the quiet, irreversible fact of something sinking. She did not call him. He came to her. She heard him close her office door behind him. She did not turn around immediately. She finished the sentence she was writing. Because she was that kind of woman, the kind who finishes sentences even when the world is rearranging itself around her. And then she turned. His face was controlled. The surface was controlled. But she had spent months learning the geography of what lived underneath his controlled surface, and she could see it clearly. The pain moving beneath the composure like something tectonic. "Your name," he said, "is on the shell corporation that is the center of the investigation into my company. Jae-won, your name, is on documents that connect directly to the illegal financial structure my father built." His voice was low, even, the specific evenness of a man holding something with both hands that is trying to destroy him. "You have been inside this company for months. You have had access to everything, and your name is on everything that is burning it to the ground. She stood up slowly. Ask me, she said. What? Ask me if I did it. Her voice was quiet, completely steady. Look at me and ask me. He looked at her. She held his gaze with the full stillness of a woman who had nothing to hide and everything to lose, and was not going to flinch from either of those facts. Did you? No. She said it before he finished. Not defensively. Simply. Like a fact that required no decoration. And you know I didn't. Because you are the most precise man I've ever met, and you have been watching me since October, and you know exactly what I am, and what I am not. Then explain. I can't explain it yet. She held his gaze. But I will. Give me... My brother is dead. His voice cracked on the word. Just slightly. Just enough to be human. My father is about to be arrested. My company is being investigated. My wife has filed for divorce. He stepped toward her. And the woman He stopped, started again. And you? You're standing in the middle of all of it with your name on the document that started everything. She felt every word land. She did not step back. I was not the one who brought me here, Jaewon. Quietly, precisely, the most important sentence she had ever said. Remember that, whatever you decide to believe in the next 5 minutes. Remember that. Something crossed his face. Something she recognized. Not anger, not accusation. The specific anguish of a man who knows the truth and is in too much pain to hold it cleanly. Get out, he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. Please, just get out. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. She did not look back. That night, she sat on her apartment floor with her back against the couch and the lights off and Seoul moving outside the window, and she did not call anyone. She did not cry immediately. She sat in the specific silence of someone who has been broken by the person they love most and is still too stunned by the breaking to make any sound at all. The silence had a texture and a temperature, and she sat inside it and let it be what it was. Then she cried. Not dramatically. Not loudly. The way you cry when something is genuinely gone. Quietly, completely, with the specific exhaustion of a woman who has been holding too much for too long and has finally put it down because she has no choice. She cried until she didn't anymore. Then she got up, washed her face, made tea she didn't drink, opened her laptop and kept working, because the truth was still the truth. She was still not the kind of woman who sat on it. He came to her door at 11 the next night. She knew it was him before she opened. Not because she heard anything specific, but because she had spent months learning the specific quality of his presence, and it had its own atmosphere that arrived before he did. She opened the door. He was standing in the corridor, with his hands at his sides and his face carrying something she had never seen on it before. Not the controlled surface. Not the grief. Not the anger. Something underneath all of those things. Something that looked, in the specific inadequate light of a corridor at 11 at night, like a man who had finally arrived at the truth of himself, and was not sure he deserved to be standing at this particular door with it. His mother had told him everything. She could see that without being told. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He tried again. Priska. Just her name. The way he said it, not like a CEO says an employee's name, not like a man says the name of a woman he has wronged, but like someone says the name of the only fixed point in a world that has stopped making sense, like the name itself was the only honest thing left. She stood in the doorway and looked at him. She did not open the door wider. She did not close it. She simply looked at him with the full complexity of everything she felt. The love and the anger and the grief and the exhaustion, and underneath all of it, running like a current through everything else, the specific, stubborn human fact that she had chosen him with her eyes open, and that had not stopped being true. Neither of them spoke. The corridor was quiet. Seoul moved somewhere below them, indifferent and eternal. The investigation moved quickly once it moved. Financial crimes at this scale, with this quality of documentation, the USB drive, the reconstructed records, the Shell Corporation evidence, did not require much time once the right people had the right information in the right order. The illegal financial operations surfaced within weeks. The structure of them, the authorization, chain, the years of carefully hidden transfers. And then something else surfaced, something nobody had been looking for. The money that had been moved through the illegal structure. The transfers with no visible destination that Priska had been flagging since her first month in the company had not been going to Jaewon's father personally. Not to any account connected to him. Not to any asset he held directly. It had been going into a private trust, established in the name of Shin Dong-hyun, Jae-won's younger brother, who had died in an accident that wasn't an accident, whose death his own father had ordered. The father had been building a financial legacy, methodically, consistently, over years, for the son he had killed. Not for himself, for the boy whose death he had arranged and had been carrying the weight of ever since. Every illegal transfer, every hidden movement of money, going into a trust that Dong-hyun would never be able to access because Dong-hyun was gone, because his father had made him gone. Guilt dressed up as legacy, punishment dressed up as provision. The revelation landed in the investigation like something that had no clean category. Not exoneration, not mitigation, simply the specific, devastating complexity of a human being who was capable of ordering his son's death and simultaneously incapable of living with having done it. The audience sat with that. There was nothing else to do with it. The letter came on a Monday. Official, formal, her name on the envelope in the specific typography of a legal institution. She was being called as a key witness in the criminal investigation into the Shin Group's financial operations. She was also, the letter was careful and precise about this, a person of interest. The Shell Corporation, registered in her name prior to her arrival in Seoul, remained unexplained, until it was explained to the satisfaction of the investigating body. She was simultaneously witness and suspect. She read the letter twice, folded it, placed it on her desk beside her coffee. She had known this was coming. She had been building toward this moment since the night she found her name on a corporation that should not have existed. Everything she had documented, everything she had reconstructed, every file on the USB drive cross-referenced against every anomaly she had flagged in her encrypted folder. She had been building the case that would walk her into that building and walk her back out clean. She was ready. She picked up her bag. She walked out of her apartment into the Seoul morning, cold and precise and entirely indifferent to the fact that the woman moving through it was about to walk into a building carrying the truth about one of the most powerful families in the city, and was going to put every word of it on the record. Alone. No lawyer beside her, no ally, no one. Just herself and everything she knew, and the specific kind of courage that does not announce itself. The building was 3 blocks from the subway. She walked. She did not sleep the night before she testified. Not because she was afraid. She was awake because she was thinking about New York. Not the New York of conversations and dangerous intimacy. The first trip, the one everyone had called innocent. She was reconstructing the dinner. She had the names now, had run them against the investigation's public filings, cross-referenced them against the financial structure she had spent months rebuilding from the inside. Every single attendee except her was connected to the illegal financial operations of the Shin Group, not peripherally, centrally. She had been sitting at that table among them, the only clean person in the room, not as a participant, not as someone who knew, as a credential. Her presence, a Georgetown-educated senior business strategist with an impeccable professional record, had made that dinner look legitimate, had made the network look like it operated in the same world as people like her. She had been used from the very first trip, before the elevator, before New York and the conversation about choice and expensive loneliness, before she had lost her place in a sentence for half a second in a 42nd floor office in Gangnam, before she had known his name. She sat with that for a long time. Then she got up, showered, put on the suit she had laid out the night before, picked up her folder containing everything she had built. Every document, every timestamp, every thread pulled through to its source and its conclusion. She walked out. She spoke for 2 hours and 14 minutes without interruption. She presented the Shell Corporation, registered in her name 18 months before she arrived in Seoul, by whom and under whose instruction she had documented completely. She presented the financial structure, the subsidiary layers, the transfer chains, the holding entities connecting the illegal operations to their source. She presented the USB drive records, authenticated and cross-referenced. She presented the fraudulent marriage clause, the addendum signed 3 days after the document it was witnessing, making it legally void. And then she presented what nobody in that room had been expecting. She had reconstructed the authorization chain for the illegal financial operations from 3 independent sources. The chain was clear and complete and led to one person, Shen Jae-won's father, exclusively. No authorization from Jae-won, no signature, no instruction, no awareness documented anywhere in 3 years of meticulous records. The illegal operations had been run by one man without his son's knowledge, without his son's authorization, without his son's involvement at any level. She laid the documentation on the table. The room was silent for 3 full seconds. She had told the truth. The whole truth, including the parts that had cost her everything. His father called at 4:17 on the day of the arrest. She answered. Miss Igbo. Controlled, precise. I will not take much of your time. Take what you need. A pause. I have been building things for 40 years, he said. Every person in my life has behaved exactly as I predicted. My son, my wife, the people I employed, the people I arranged. Another pause. You were the only variable I could not account for. In 20 years. She listened. I built the corporation in your name because I needed someone whose integrity was unimpeachable. Someone whose presence would make everything around her look clean. I chose you before my daughter-in-law ever mentioned your name. A breath. I did not anticipate that you would be the person who dismantled everything I built. I should have. That was my error. Yes, she said. It was. Silence. You testified to my son's innocence, he said. You did not have to. I testified to the truth, she said. Your son's innocence is part of the truth. I don't get to choose which parts I tell. Silence with a quality she could not fully name. Not remorse, not gratitude. Something that lived in the space between those two things, where a man who cannot undo what he has done simply exists. "I hope you find some peace," she said. She hung up. She sat for a moment. Then she got up and kept going. He was outside the building when she came out. She stopped when she saw him. Dark coat, hands in his pockets, face carrying something she had never seen on it before. Not control, not grief, not anguish. Something quieter. A man who had finally arrived somewhere after a very long time of being in motion. She crossed the pavement. They stood in the same air without speaking. The city moved around them. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know." He looked at her with the full undivided attention she had been feeling on her skin since October. Except now there was nothing underneath it she had to file or refuse to examine. Simply him. No empire. No arrangement. Just a man. Standing on a pavement in Seoul, looking at the woman he had spent months understanding he had not deserved. "Priska, not yet," she said quietly. He closed his mouth. She looked at him one moment longer. Then she walked to the subway. She did not look back. But she was smiling, just slightly, just enough. Jisoo found him on a Tuesday morning in February. He was at the table nearest the window of her coffee shop, sitting with a coffee and a book and the ease of someone comfortable in their own company. Not performing, waiting. Simply there. She stopped when she saw him. He looked up. 7 years. The last time she had seen him, she had been a different version of herself, younger, less controlled, still capable of loving someone without calculating what it would cost. He said her name. Not her full name. The shortened version that belonged to the version of her that existed before Seoul, and the arrangement and the long, careful war she had waged to leave with everything she was. Ode. He said it the way someone says a name they have been keeping safe inside them for a very long time. She sat down. He did not ask about the years or the marriage or what had happened in between. He simply looked at her the way she had forgotten people could, like she was the destination rather than a stop along the way, like she had been chosen rather than arranged. She had spent years pouring love into a man who received it politely. She sat across from this man on a Tuesday morning and felt what it was to be seen. It did not fix everything she had done. The plan, the documents, the photograph, the divorce engineered with the cold precision of a woman whose love had reached its expiration date. None of that was undone. But it gave her somewhere to land. And after years of holding everything alone that was not nothing, it was everything. 6 months later, Priska opened the door of her consulting firm in Washington, D.C. at 7:58 and made coffee and sat at her desk and felt exactly like herself. The firm was small, 4 people, 3rd floor, afternoon light, built by her own hands on her own terms from the specific clarity that Seoul had given her at a price she was still calculating. She was grateful for the clarity. She was working on the grateful for the cost. The inquiry arrived through the standard intake process, a company name she didn't recognize. 10 o'clock Thursday. Routine. She was finishing a call when her assistant knocked. "You're 10 o'clock. Send them in." She set her phone down. Looked up. Shen Jae-won walked through the door. Dark suit, no tie. Exactly himself. Not the CEO of an empire. Not the man who had accused her or stood outside an investigation building in the Seoul cold, or said her name in a corridor at 11 at night like it was the only fixed point in a world that had stopped making sense. Just Jae-won. He sat down across from her desk without a word, reached into his jacket, placed a document on the desk between them. She looked at it, a formal proposal, precisely formatted. She would have expected nothing less. Argument structured in 3 parts, evidence-based, completely sincere in the way that only things written by people with nothing left to perform are completely sincere. The proposal made the case, methodically, specifically without exaggeration, for why she should give him a chance to be in her life properly this time. Not as her employer, not as her best friend's husband, not as the man whose empire she had helped dismantle or whose innocence she had testified to, as a man who knew exactly what he had lost, and had spent 6 months becoming someone who might deserve to ask for it back. She read every page. He sat across from her and waited with the stillness she had catalogued since the first meeting in a 42nd floor office in Gangnam. Except now it was not the controlled stillness of a man managing what the world saw of him. It was the stillness of a man with nothing left to manage, sitting across from the one person who had seen every layer of him and waiting to find out if what remained was something she could want. She finished the last page, set it down, looked up at him. He was watching her the way he had watched her from the very beginning. The full, undivided attention a woman feels on her skin before she can explain it. Except now, there was nothing underneath it that needed to be filed or argued against. Simply him. Simply his eyes on hers. Simply a man who had flown from Seoul to Washington, D.C. and walked through a consulting firm door at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning because he did not know how to do this any other way. She almost smiled. She opened her mouth to speak. Her phone buzzed on the desk between them. She glanced at it automatically. 1 second. The screen lighting up. 1 second was enough. Jisoo. 2 words. Priska looked at the screen. Looked at Jae-won. Looked at the screen again. Something moved across her face. Not the controlled surface. Not the professional composure. Something underneath all of that, human and complicated and entirely her own. Something the audience had been watching her face for the entire story to see. Jae-won watched it happen. Priska, he said quietly. She looked up at him. She opened her mouth. If this story moved you, then please like this video right now. Leave a comment and tell us, what would you have done in her place? And subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Every week, we bring you stories of forbidden love, betrayal, revenge, and the kind of wisdom that only reveals itself to those who stay until the end. You stayed. That means something. We'll see you in the next one.